Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms. Now, if you're married and you have children, more than likely you've had an argument with your spouse. And sometimes the children overhear. Sometimes the children are right in that same room. So you might get in such a heated discussion that you don't think about what you're saying in front of the children. A lot of times couples may say things that children really shouldn't hear. Maybe some of your personal, private issues that you have. Maybe you might even, if you're very spirited, get to the point where it gets physical. Now, some couples are very conscious of this. They consciously do not argue in front of their children. They do not use bad language or call names in front of their children. They've made a conscious decision not to do things that would be disturbing to their children. And then there have been those couples that never argued in front of their children, but the marriage was in trouble and they had some irreconcilable differences. So one day out of the blue, they say to their children, well, me and your father or me and your mother, we're getting a divorce. And the children are like, where did that come from? Because they never saw a disagreement. So the question is, should you let your children see you fighting? Is it disturbing for them to see that there is conflict? Or are we being realistic by giving them a true glimpse of what marriage is about and what it's like and how you go about solving conflicts? And at what point is your fighting dysfunctional behavior? How do you know the difference? Well, sisters, we're going to take a look at this. And based on our personal experience as mothers and daughters and people who may have a temper every now and then, the question is, should you let your children see you fighting? What do you think?
I think that it's important that your kids see both sides of conflict. Now, I will say, as a child growing up in our household, when our parents fell out, there were moments, hours, days of that uncomfortable silence. And then they would go back to being normal as if nothing had happened. We never saw anyone say they were sorry. We never saw anybody making up. And that was like mystifying because number one, as children, we never knew what caused the fight. And then on the other hand, we didn't know what did they do to make it better. Now, in my own household, this is very unique. I remember an instance, and I don't even remember. You look back and you don't even remember half the fights, what they were about, because they were like crazy, trivial, normal stuff. But I remember one time Eric and I were having a disagreement about something, and Lavinia came into the room and she was very upset. She must have been about 4 or maybe 5 or 6, but she was young enough to be concerned and say, "Are you getting a divorce?" And we were shocked that she even knew what that word meant. You know, we do live in a society where every other couple, you know, they're divorced from their spouse. But I remember saying, "Oh no, Lavinia, I would never, ever leave your father unless he went crazy and tried to chop me up with a hatchet." Now, I don't recommend saying stuff like that.
Yeah, that kind of humor could get lost on a 4-year-old.
So, but I know. But I think that when we have had conflict, and we read this in one of those parenting books, We tried to make sure the children were there when we made up. And to our credit, I have to say, one of us would be really angry and the other one wouldn't, or vice versa. It seemed like we were not both about to jump off the ledge at the same time. One of us was, as we say, was in the spirit and could kind of calm the other person down and say something like, "Oh, do you need to pray?" And you'd be like, "No, do you need to pray?" But we would have these moments where when we were reconciling, the one person or the other would say they were sorry, and then the other person would say, "I'm sorry too," and then we would pray together. And we wanted our kids to be able to see that. And I think that as a young couple, when our kids were young, a lot of our battles were really about ego.
Oh, most are. Pretty much every argument is about ego. It's always ego, because otherwise you don't really need to argue. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to weigh in here as let me just say it this way. You can either be a good example or you can be a cautionary tale.
Mm.
I'm probably a cautionary tale.
Oh.
I'm not going to lie. Don't do what I do. When Sean and I argue, and it's not that often, we're probably, and it's never turned physical. So, we're not crazy. And, one of us isn't dead and I'm not in jail. So, so we would get into rare arguments where there might be some name calling, usually not me starting that kind of stuff, because usually I'm angry and I get loud. Yes, I'm one of those. And you get loud because you're not heard. And then it just gets to be the silent treatment, and you just don't speak for a while. And eventually somebody says something like, "Well, I'm going to the store. You want something," which is love language for "I'm sorry," because we don't actually say "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
And and for Sarah, I'm not, she looks like him, she acts like me. So when she gets angry with someone, she's willing to cut them off, and she's learning herself. And because she does, believe in seeing a therapist to talk out her anxieties and her troubles, and I highly recommend that. She is learning how to resolve conflict in a way that I probably have not taught her well. For me, I tend to just constantly threaten to kill my husband and bury him out back with the others. Also, not a good example of conflict resolution.
And your child nightmares too. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But and I said, if something ever happens, he comes up missing, they're just gonna come get me because I've told everybody. It's like that Eddie Murphy thing with killing buckwheat. Well, yeah, we knew he did it because that's all he ever talked about. So that's the same way I am. But as far as conflict resolution, we try, whether she was here or not, because obviously now when she's at college, she doesn't get it. But and like I said, we really don't argue that often. Usually we do try to talk it out, and usually it doesn't work very well because he's still not hearing, I'm still not hearing, I'm still mad, he's still mad. And but to our credit, we don't keep bringing it back. And the thing is that if you have really, really good conflict resolution skills, when you resolve it, you don't relitigate it. And so
there you go.
That's the one part of the conflict resolution we do, is that we don't relitigate stuff. It's like, okay, you're going to just let sleeping dogs lie. So I'm not sure yes, your child should see, if your child is there for an argument, a disagreement, the child should also either see the resolution or you should talk to them later and say, well, we talked it out, we decided this, and I said I was sorry, he said he was sorry, and you should let them know that it's okay to argue with your significant other, but you can't just let it fester. And I try not to let things fester, because that's just a whole lot of anger for no reason. But like I say, I'm more of a cautionary tale than it's not like I'm not as good at that as I should be, because intellectually I know what I should do. But I'm gonna tell you something. When you're mad, you're just mad.
Yeah.
You just have to stay mad until you decide you're not mad anymore. Or you go to that person and say, listen, I'm still mad, but you want to go and get something to eat.
Yeah. I learned a lot about myself and the process of learning how to resolve conflict. I learned that I have an explosive temper, and it's kind of like a volcano. You suppress the energy and suppress it and suppress it, and then suddenly it explodes and just shoots garbage all over the place, just makes a mess. so I learned after a few years in marriage that I can't try to suppress the anger. I have to talk about it, because otherwise it's going to explode, and then everything comes out and it's not pleasant. So Sultana and I made a conscious decision also that since we argued in front of Zakia, she also needs to see the resolution, because growing up in our house, we never knew what happened. We just heard okay, fights, silence, and then all of a sudden everything is okay. It's okay. Well, what happened? We never knew. So we wanted, Sultana and I wanted Zakia to understand the process of conflict resolution. How do you discuss what happened? And then, you apologize for your part in it and you resolve it. So that she would have the skills on how to resolve things. Now, the interesting thing about prayers, there were times, we all praying and everything, but there were times after an argument and I would be saying prayers and God would say to me, Naima, what you did was wrong. You need to go to Sultana and apologize. And I'd be so convicted, and then when I'd go to Sultana and say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have did so and so and so. He said, well, I was praying that you would understand. So, I guess God answered his prayers, because I ended up admitting I was wrong. So a lot of the conflict probably was due to my not knowing how to express displeasure about something when I was still calm about it. I would wait until I got so fed up that I just exploded, and then you have an argument, because then you say stuff that really isn't pleasant. So I've learned over the years not to allow things to fester to that point where my anger is so out of control that I can't manage what's coming out of my mouth. And Zakia, of course, as an adult woman now, she reminds me that I was not this peaceful person that everyone sees during that time, that, there was some tornadoes that I created with my own explosive energy. So knowing that, I realized that your children are always going to give you the true reflection of yourself, because they lived in the house with you and they know what you did. But she also has seen my growth and getting to a point of self-management. But Sultan would remind me on occasion that when it came to which of us had a tendency to become physically violent, it was always me. So
the mad Black woman syndrome.
Yes. And people are, oh, your husband, because in public, everybody thought I was, the meek, humble wife. She does what her husband said to beat you. And he was like, "No, you want to know who gets beat in that house?" Yeah, I mean,
Well, maybe you know what? Maybe we should say something here, and that is that physical uh, abuse of your partner is never healthy.
it's never healthy. And this
If
is
you're
It's
hitting him
never
on the
right.
back, it better be because you're trying to dislodge something that's stuck in his throat.
right. Yeah, really. Better be trying to.
You do not hit each other. If it comes to that point, that is domestic violence. And what you're teaching your children is that when you get angry enough, it's okay to hit somebody or to have somebody hit you.
Right.
So we have to, like I said, you have to be a cautionary tale. And I'm fortunate we don't hit in this house, even though sometimes I've smacked him on the butt when he's in my way.
Standing in front of the drawer in the kitchen, you need to
Yes,
get
standing in, like, do you see me trying to get my vitamins? Why are you standing here right now? But but not but never ever in anger. We never get to that point where it's going to become physical, because that's something else altogether different. And we also have to understand that a lot of times when we argue, what we're arguing about is not what we're arguing about.
It's always, like what
It's always something else.
It's always something that's underlying that you haven't addressed. And I can't really even think of too many of the reasons for our arguments. It was usually some underlying thing that had to do with, you didn't respect me. It's always an ego thing in the mind. Well, I said this and you didn't comply, or I did this and you did that, or it's always something. But there was a time, and there would be times when Zakia, as a matter of fact, I'm remembering, it seemed like every time she took sides, she took his side. I do remember that.
Well, I will have to
say,
and the conflict in our home, it mostly happened during the time that the children were all teenagers. Eric was working full time. He was in seminary full time. I was working, and all the kids were at the age where they're going to drive you crazy already. And I remember thinking, when we got into it, my husband always took the kids' side. I'm like, wait a minute, who am I? But I remember that as a family, when we moved out of the situation that we had lived in for like 20 years, we went straight to family counseling, because I knew that we needed something to be able to know how to interact with each other. And I saw my children's personalities just blossom. They felt the freedom to be able to say what they were really feeling, to express themselves freely about no subject was off the table, and it was very helpful to them. And I think in a marriage situation, the same thing goes. You read all of those marriage books. I know when Eric and I first got married, one of the gifts we got was a married couple devotional that we would read together every day. And every single one of these books, they always tell you, when you get angry, don't go to bed mad. Table your conflict for the moment and say, we can talk about this in the morning. They tell you don't fight at night, because everything escalates as soon as it gets dark. Yeah. Whatever it is, it turns into a horrendous scene. And I just remember some of the best conflict resolution times we had was when we could talk about things when we weren't angry, especially if it was something that really needed to be discussed. And I am not a fan of bringing up stuff that happened 10 years ago and then somebody is bringing it up. I have actually observed this and decided, when I get married, I am not doing that. And I think one of the things when you're having a disagreement, sometimes there has to be parameters set. Like when they talk about domestic violence, it rarely starts with somebody hitting you. It starts with a person saying demeaning things. And then it
Absolutely.
slowly escalates to the shoving, the hitting. I mean, as a counselor who has actually counseled married couples, we had a couple where the husband pulled a gun on his wife and she was out of there the next day. He came home from work and the apartment had been stripped and she left and they got a divorce. Now, the thing with that situation, as a couple counseling them, Eric and I were not able to help them because they had already gotten to that level. And we were not professional counselors. We were just a married couple who'd been married a number of years, had gotten some skills under our belt, and someone recommended us to them. And we met them, and then the wife plays a phone call message. She was late getting to lunch, and he had called her up and just floored her. And then when we met, he said, "Oh no, I never talk like that." So then she plays the recording back, and he was like in shock. He was like, "Who is that person?" So sometimes a person can actually be so revved up, they have no idea what they have said. And between me and Eric as a couple, we made a decision. There were certain things that we were never going to say. We're never going to say, "I hate you." We're never going to say, "You don't love me." We're never going to say, "I'm leaving you."
Right.
And we just kind of said these things that had to be repeated as we got older as a married couple. And I think sometimes those things really need to be said because people will fly off the handle. You're going to mimic what you grew up with. And unless you learn other marriage skills, you're going to find yourself turning into your parents, even when you swore up and down you would not.
Right. And that's why you really have to reflect on what it is you really did observe and what things were good that you want to repeat and what things you don't want to repeat. And then you have to be conscious when you see yourself doing those things you said you wouldn't do and stop yourself, because nobody can stop you. You got to stop yourself. I had to get a handle on my own anger. I had to shut my own mouth because, I can rip somebody to shreds with just the words that come out of my mouth, and there's nothing that can destroy a relationship quicker than saying hurtful things, because those things, even though you might make up and say you're sorry, but the pain is still there and you don't want to create wounds that never heal. So I think it is important for us to, like you say this is what we will never say, and then really stick to it. Don't let it come out of your mouth if you know that those are the unsayables.
A wise woman builds her house, but a foolish woman tears it down with her own hands.
There you go. Well, we've got to go, and we want you to, of course, contact us on Twitter, Instagram, and our blogs, and follow us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, 3 Black Moms. I'm Naima.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Barbara. We are 3 Black Moms.